Counting salmon along Alaska's waterways doesn't come without risks, because where there's salmon, there are bears, as Jess Coltharp and his colleagues found out. A grizzly charges at them out of nowhere and grabs Jess in its jaws, shaking him violently. He must now rely on his friends to save him, but will they make it in time? Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce. For all your outdoor essentials, visit fierceoutdoor.com. We specialize in gear that keeps you safe and prepared for any wildlife adventure. Gear up for your next trip into the wild at fierceoutdoor.com, where safety meets adventure. On August 19, 2021, Jess Coltharp was at work. He didn't have a standard office job like some do. Instead, he worked in the great outdoors. He was a fish and game fisheries technician. One of his jobs was to survey the rivers and creeks in Sitka, southeast Alaska. He was tasked with counting salmon, an important job that would help understand fish movements, the ecology of the area, and the health of the waterways. Jess had been conducting the surveys for 14 years, and the work wasn't without its hazards. One of those was the presence of bears. He had to be very bear-aware when walking in their territory. Along the rivers themselves, bears posed the biggest risk while he was at work. In a single summer, he typically spotted 80 or 90 bears. Although many of them were spotted from a safe distance, more than half of them were close encounters. But Jess knew he needed to remain vigilant and always took care when out in the field. It was around 5 p.m. that evening, and Jess had finished his surveying work for the day. He and his deckhand, Anthony Wallach, and a volunteer named Ethan had walked the length of a stream on West Chickagoff Island. They had finished counting the salmon and turned to head back to their boat. It was moored up along a stretch of river half a mile away. Jess took the lead, walking in front of the other two along a narrow winding path parallel to the stream. They could hear the bubbling water and the sound of birds in the trees. As evening set in, they knew they still had a number of hours daylight left. They didn't want to be in the woods as the light faded, and so left in plenty of time. But as Jess trod along the little path, he was walking straight into danger. He turned his head to talk over his shoulder to the others, when suddenly he heard some rustling in the bushes ahead and turned to look back. The rustling came from the salmonberry bushes 20 feet away. There was a flash of brown, and a grizzly bear came charging out of the brush. There was no warning. There was no clacking of jaws or growling, no mock charge or standoff. Its ears were pinned back against its broad head. Its eyes locked onto Jess as it ran at him. Jess grabbed the gun from the holster on his back. He tried to load the chamber, but the bear was too fast. It covered the ground between them in a second. At the last moment, Jess ducked out of the way. He dived to the side, avoiding a full-on collision, and the bear caught him on the leg. It bit down just above his kneecap. The searing pain from the deep bite shot through him. The bear then thrashed its head from side to side, shaking Jess with it. It growled as it attacked him. The power of the attack was indescribable. Jess was at the mercy of the mighty beast, unable to free himself from its jaws. His gun had been sent flying into the undergrowth, and he tried to fight the bear off with his hands. He screamed at the other two to shoot the bear. He shouted it over and over again, imploring them to take the shot. Anthony had been about 15 feet behind Jess when the bear had charged. Instinctively, he had raised his gun straight away, but now in the tussle, Anthony was afraid of hitting Jess. His heart was thumping hard in his chest. He knew he had to take the shot. With the bear on top of Jess, he realized that this was going to be the best shot he would have. He couldn't wait any longer. With his friend and colleague screaming at him, he took aim at the bear and squeezed the trigger. A loud crack rang out through the trees, and the bear rolled off Jess. Anthony took a few steps forward and pumped 2 more shots into the bear, just to make sure that it didn't get back up. It was an instant relief, taking in what had just happened. "Hell of a shot, buddy," exclaimed Jess, sitting up. When he spoke, Anthony felt calmer. To hear his friend's voice and see him sitting up was the reassurance he needed that everything was going to be okay. But that's when Jess felt the warm blood trickling down his leg. His trousers were ripped and torn. When he rolled them up, He could see a large gaping wound near his knee. The blood oozed out, spilling onto the ground. Jess was at risk of going into shock. His body was shaking a little from the fright of it all, but he and the others had been prepared for situations like this. The Fish and Game Department had trained all their colleagues for work in the wild, and on top of that, Anthony had EMT training from working in the fire service. They assessed the situation and immediately cleaned Jess's wound and tied a tourniquet around his leg. Then they reached into the backpack and pulled out their in-reach satellite communication device. They called their boss. He organized for a float plane to meet them at the open water near where the boat was moored up. To get there, the three men had to hike half a mile. The going was slow. Jess paused every so often to take the pressure off his leg. It was now throbbing with pain. The infection was beginning to take hold. He needed medical attention as soon as possible, but he also knew the importance of keeping morale up. The three of them talked to each other as they made the grueling journey back along the stream. Jess felt immensely relieved to have survived the attack. He kept relaying it back over in his mind, recalling every tiny detail. The power of the bear had been terrifying. If it had bitten him anywhere else, that it could have been a much worse ending. He was lucky that it had only bitten his leg and not severed any major blood vessels. Alaska makes up almost a third of all fatal bear attacks in the U.S. Fatal attacks occur on average once every other year. In Alaska, you can run into both black and brown bears, as well as polar bears in the north. Although grizzlies are 20 times more likely to attack than black bears across the states, in Alaska, both are equally likely to attack, with 15% of them leading to fatalities. Jess paused to catch his breath, sitting down on a fallen tree that lay beside the river. He called out to Anthony and asked him to take a photograph. He smiled at the camera, showing off his attack wound on his leg and sporting a thumbs up. It was another attempt at keeping morale up. It would have been easy to let emotions take over, let fear take control, but the three of them refused to let that happen. Gradually, they made their way to their boat. When they finally arrived, Jess was loaded up into the plane that was waiting for them, whilst the others took the boat. Jess was flown straight to Mount Edgecombe Medical Center, making it to the emergency room less than 2 hours after the attack. He required surgery and physical therapy, but was on the mend shortly afterwards. He credits his survival to the quick thinking and exceptional shot of Anthony, owing his life to him.